Welcome to the 2022 NCAA Convention. We're glad that you've joined us for a discussion on cultivating, recruiting, and retaining diverse talent, areas of consideration. My name is Felicia Martin, Interim Senior Vice President of Inclusion, Education, and Community Engagement, and Vice President for NCAA Eligibility Center. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Aristotle is credited with saying excellence is never an accident. It's always the result of high intention, sincere effort, and intelligent execution. It represents the wise choice of many alternatives. Choice, not chance, determines your destiny. The importance of developing and retaining diverse talent is an evergreen and evolving conversation. It's always the result of high intention, sincere effort, and intelligent execution. To that end, today my colleagues will share ideas and resources to support diverse recruitment and hiring efforts. It represents the wise choice of many alternatives. Cultivating, recruiting, and retaining diverse talent may require you to unlearn old ways and rethink, or as Adam Grant would say, think again. Presidents and chancellors at NCAA member schools and universities are encouraged to sign a pledge that commits their schools to achieving ethnic and racial diversity and gender equity in college sport hiring practices. The presidential pledge was developed out of a membership concern for the low representation of racial and ethnic minorities and women in coaching and athletics administration at all levels. To date, 87% of NCAA member schools and universities have signed the pledge. You can review a list of the schools and conferences whose leaders have pledged their commitment to promoting diversity and gender equity. Visit the Presidential Pledge landing page at the link available in our session chat. As a reminder, this session is being recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing within 48 hours of the conclusion of today's presentation. You can access the recording in the session information on the digital convention platform. You can also view and participate in the convention sessions via the NCAA Convention app, the app version of the digital convention platform available in Apple app and Google Play stores. This is a new app and not the NCAA events app used previously. Now, let's welcome to the virtual stage, Director of NCAA Leadership Development, Dee Merritt. Enjoy the session.
Thank you, Felicia. Hello, everyone. My name is Dee Merritt. I proudly serve as the Director of Leadership Development. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am so happy to be here with my partner in leadership development, as well as our colleagues in inclusion to present this material in our learning environment for today. What I want to do is just start out and tell you a little bit about leadership development. For those of you who don't know who we are the education and training arm of the national office. Our job is to educate and empower student athletes, coaches, and administrators. We do that a wide variety of ways through in-person programming, through hybrid learning environments, as well as e-learning. And we do that so that we can develop effective leaders to be able to have an enhanced college athletics landscape. We serve you. And our goal, our ultimate mode of service is to our student athletes. We do that through direct programs that have a direct touch with them so that they have the opportunity to be able to learn and grow in that environment. We also do that indirectly, and that is through our programs for administrators and coaches, those who coach, teach, and lead them. All of this is done with the keen eye for diversity and inclusion. We try and take the work that our colleagues in inclusion do every day and put it into practice in our programming so that we are creating leaders in an gender equity and diversity and inclusion landscape so that our student athletes can see that sort of environment. We want to do our part to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to enhance our athletic departments to be places where we have diverse and inclusive leadership. Our team values our program excellence, making sure that we have a transformational learning experience and community building. That is us in a nutshell. Our programs run the gamut, again, of student athletes, coaches, and administrators. Some of them you can see here. Please feel free to visit our website on the ncaa.org website to be able to gather more information. But we do have programs for all levels, student athletes, and then all levels of coaches and administrators. Again, really doing what we can to make sure that we are setting the table for career advancement, professional development, all under the diversity and inclusive leadership lens. So what I'm here to talk to you about today is to give you an overview of the current administrator and coaching demographics, and then share a little bit of information about the leadership collective. What we see in the numbers is that the numbers really haven't changed. The landscape really isn't as diverse and inclusive as it should be. As we can see from the numbers on this slide, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in those leadership positions that at many campuses would be considered in the senior leadership level. There's still a lot of work to be done to increase the numbers of ethnic minorities and the number of women in leadership positions. And so that's what we're here to do, is to do our part to help with that. We also know that at the highest position, which is our director of athletics, those numbers have not changed as well. Really looking at that and saying that the numbers are overwhelmingly skewed in a way that doesn't promote inclusive leadership. And so one of the initiatives out of the many programs and services that we have is our Leadership Collective. And so the Leadership Collective, we originally launched the collective last year, right around this time. And it is a platform that was developed through feedback from the Board of Governors, their directive to us to basically be able to solve for a problem. And that is that individuals in hiring positions weren't able to find qualified women or minorities. And so we were tasked with programming and opportunities. And what we were able to develop was a platform to showcase minority senior level administrators and coaches at institutions and conferences within the NCAA who are and should be included in those hiring decisions so that we can enhance our landscape. Presidents, chancellors, athletic directors, conference commissioners, those are the people that are the audience for this type of platform. So we launched last year version 1.0, as I affectionately call it. And if we take a look at that slide, you'll see that the original, I'm sorry, I missed the slide. Ethnic minority administrators and coaches are our participant profile. Those individuals who have 5 or more years of progressive experience and coached in NCAA sponsored sport. That was the original group that we developed the platform for. And in that current version, you'll see that we had 4 main tabs for the leadership development. And that was a tab that gave users the opportunity to expound on themselves, to be able to list out the particular experiences that they had, to be able to list out their education and professional development experiences, as well as to be able to list videos and press for themselves, so that the searchers would have the opportunity to get to know them and to get to know them in a more in-depth way than what you would see or be able to glean from a resume. What we've done for the past year is work on version 2.0. a version that we will launch on March 1st of this year. And we started working on that because what I quickly realized when I inherited this project was that this needed to be something that was open to all levels and not just that senior level. So we decided to bring the work in-house. And we've had the opportunity and the pleasure to work with our wonderful IT team in developing a newer version of the collective. And we're really proud of where we are with this. What we've done is be able to input more detail into this system so that searchers, when they are making searches and looking for people, will be able to really streamline and create pretty in-depth searches. There are 5 tabs that we now have on this new platform. And as you can see here, the first tab was their contact information. That tab will contain information relative to them, their job title. But one of the things that's really specific and important about that tab is to their career experience. So what we've done is we've categorized a career path in 4 levels: entry level, mid, senior level, and executive. Again, trying to make sure that we're doing everything that we possibly can so that searchers on the back end can perform pretty meticulous and detailed searches to be able to really find those individuals that they're looking for. You will also be able, users will be able to list out their social media platform, contact information, as well as you can see, as you move through the tabs, your picture will stay there as well as your resume. So at any given time, when a searcher wants to gather some specific information that may not be listed here, they'll be able to pull your resume up. On this tab in particular is where we start to talk about the oversight and experience. We've expanded this offering from version 1.0 so that users can really drill down into the areas of experience within an athletic department that they've had. So that, again, on that searcher side, they'll be able to really drill down and be able to perform detailed searches. On our next tab, we have our experience overview. And in the original version, we had this on the first page, our About Me page, and it was towards the bottom of the page, and you would have to scroll down and look at it. And we felt like this information was something that was really important. And what we've done is we've added questions to the platform that give our platform users the opportunity to really expound on themselves, their leadership, their experiences, their career goals, because we know that we have some institutions who may not want to use a search firm, may not be able to afford to use a search firm. So here is the opportunity for you to be able to almost do some of your own vetting to really get a sense of the individual that you are searching and what their leadership style is, what their experiences are, what they've learned from different career experiences, what their goals are, and their outlook on their professional career. So it's the opportunity for people to really talk about themselves and to be able to display information that may not be caught in the regular resume. The next tab is our professional experience tab. And here's where our users get the opportunity to list their educational experience, their job history, as well as their professional development. All of this stuff is searchable on the other end. Again, we want to make sure that everything is translating over to the searcher side so that that searcher can be able to go in and perform these detailed searches. Our last piece of information, which I didn't include in the slide, but was we still included a tab for the videos and press. We're calling it the external links. So you still have the opportunity to be able to upload those media pieces that you feel would be relevant for individuals to have to be helpful in giving a more clear idea of who you are and what you're all about. On the searcher side, as you can see, the searchers have the opportunity to perform a wide variety of searches. They can search by name. They can search by geographical location, institution, conference, experience level, position type. Pretty much everything that we could possibly think of, we have put into this slide so that, again, our users can really, really dig deep into those searches and learn more about the profile users that have profiles on here. And then on our last slide, we've also given our recruiters, our searchers, the opportunity to just be able to arrange information. Let's say they don't want to perform a detailed search. They just want to arrange the information in a certain way so that they can see the names and positions of those people out there in a particular position type. Maybe it's an affiliation as far as a conference office. They're able to do those searches, not to the level of the detailed search on the previous slide, but they're able to still be able to conduct searches by toggling and arranging information using our drop-down menus here. Being able to use the career experience as an indicator so that they could just scroll through and see the names of the individuals who are listed on the platform and be able to click on their profiles from there. So our goal is to really make sure that we are having a platform put out for our profile users as well as our searchers so that you can get a really clear sense of who the profile users are and be able to make decisions accordingly. We are going to roll this out March 1st and then continue to make changes. The beauty of this platform now being completely in-house at the NCAA is that we now have the opportunity to continue to make this a fluid platform so that whatever changes we need to make based on what the career trends are, topics or areas of interest that you as the membership look to see and say you'd like to know more about users in this space, we're able to make those changes real in-house. And so we're really happy and excited about having that potential with our work. With that, I just want to thank you for your time. More than happy to answer any questions. Please feel free to reach out to me at our leadership development website. And with that, I will turn it over to Naya Blair and she'll take over. Naya?
Thank you, Dee Dee. Hello, everyone. My name is Naya Blair Hackworth. I use pronouns she, her, hers, and I serve as the Director of Inclusion in the NCAA Office of Inclusion. Similar to our colleague Dee Dee talking about leadership development, I want to start out by talking about the Office of Inclusion and how we support the recruiting and retaining of diverse staff. At our department, we facilitate programs and provide educational resources, as well as advocate for diverse, equitable, and inclusive opportunities that not only enhance the student-athlete experience, but also provide opportunities for coaches and administrators. And we do this not only, again, from the resources and the educational programming, but through our annual events like the NCAA Inclusion Forum that supports the membership's efforts to achieve and maintain inclusive excellence. And we know that one part of maintaining inclusive excellence is being able to cultivate, recruit, and retain diverse staff. We do our work through looking at our 5 core areas. And our 5 core areas are disability, international, LGBTQ+, race, ethnicity, women, and gender equity. And the work that we do, we use an intersectional lens to approach the work in thinking about the multiple identities and dimensions of diversity that we each bring to the workplace and that our student athletes bring to our athletic departments. Also, how we support diverse hiring is through our direct work with our committees. So we have various diversity, equity, inclusion committees or task force that directly support diverse hiring in various ways, be it in creating resources, be it creating best practices, advocating for various things from our diverse committees from the association level to best practices that can be utilized on the conference level as well as within the athletic departments. So I'm going to get into the heart of talking about retaining diverse talent. And before I do that, I want to talk and share a few questions with you on engaging and retaining diverse top talent. And then one of my colleagues, Lamar, who will introduce himself, will engage with me on this conversation. And then we want you to engage. And so as you look at this slide, feel free to take a picture, screenshot. We'll show it to you at the end. And of course, this is being recorded. But these questions really talk about how do you maintain diverse top talent? And so thinking about how do you engage new staff? Or how intentional are you with socializing with members from different backgrounds? How are you leading outward, practicing accountability and allyship, as well as leading inward, demonstrating humility and courage? So these are some things to not only think about, but to put into place in action when trying to engage and retain diverse top talent. So again, before we get into this conversation, we want to encourage you to join the conversation with us, right? So use the NCAA CON hashtag on social media. So if we say something that's like really good, shout us out or share different things that you're doing on your campuses and your conference offices as it relates to diverse hiring. Engage in the chat. We know it's the afternoon, but we want to hear from you, right? And submit questions via chat and we'll get to as many questions as possible. So, Lamar, you want to introduce yourself before we pose this first question to the group?
Great. Thanks, Nye. Happy to be here. Lamar Pottinger. I serve as the Associate Director for Leadership Development, and I have the privilege to be on this all-star team today. So I'm happy to join the conversation and have a good discussion.
All right. Well, looking forward to discussing this with you, Lamar. So our first question to you all is, how do you engage staff in the workplace? It's not a trick question. So put it in the chat to share your answers. How do you engage staff in the workplace? And so while we're waiting for our virtual participants to share, Lamar, how do you engage staff in the workplace? Especially when thinking about creating an inclusive workplace environment, because that's what we want, right?
Yeah, I think there's a couple sides to it for sure. As a leader or manager, it's always trying to make sure that you have that initial first one-on-one that is not in the office. I think it's very beneficial to have a personal touch to get to know the people that you're about to work with. So whether that's going for a cup of coffee or tea, or during the pandemic, jumping on a 30-minute Teams or Zoom call that is more personal just to get to know each other. I think that's the way I would like to engage staff that are new. I think being intentional, engaging staff that are either within your department or not in your department is learning about what their job is and what they do. And when you see them, well, we're hybrid now, but when you see them by the printer or going through the hall, engage in a conversation like, hey, I saw you did this program the other day. Like, how did that go? Right. Just to make sure that we're not operating in a silo within our departments to express some interest in what other people are doing. So I would say those are a few ways.
Those are all great ways. I think, some other ways that some people have talked about engaging the staff that you mentioned is getting to know individuals, understanding their unique backgrounds. A lot of time we place a lot of emphasis in that in the recruiting stage, but in terms of retaining and cultivating that environment, we don't necessarily always engage staff on a consistent basis, right? Particularly when we might think that we might not have a lot of things in common with a person or who their style may be different from ours. And it's very important when we're thinking about retaining diverse staff that we're engaging staff in the workplace. And so for time, we won't go over everything in the chat. Thanks for those who, are still thinking about it and responding, but we want to share some best practices to engage staff. And so this is very important. One is to be able to utilize inclusive language. And a lot of times we think about inclusive language when it comes to introducing oneself and utilizing pronouns. And that's certainly one aspect of inclusive language. But recognizing we have multiple identities, and it's important of how a person wants to be addressed, be it with a pronoun or be with thinking about their racial or cultural identity, thinking about the terminology we're using in terms of maybe a person with a disability. Again, making sure that our language is inclusive, and not only our language in terms of how we're communicating, but also that our policies and procedures are utilizing inclusive language. I know at the national office, the Office of Inclusion has recently had a second edition of our inclusive language guide, where national office staff are looking at our policies and procedures to make sure that we are utilizing inclusive language, and not only in our policies and procedures, right, but how we foster an inclusive environment. And we hope to be able to share that inclusive language guide with the membership with you all in the near future. Also, it's important for staff to understand the unique needs of staff, right? Because we all have different backgrounds and identities that shape who we are. Lamar, can you talk a little bit about why you feel like it's important to understand the unique needs of staff?
Absolutely. And I'll allude to it a little bit later during the development side of things. But I think even on the personal side, but on the professional side, knowing their communication style, knowing their work styles, and knowing what they need from you, not just as a manager or leader, but as a coworker, or even as a subordinate, right? So being able to have that up, down, and across view of your staff and knowing those unique needs is what helps team cohesion that'll lead then into your department organization being able to perform better once you have that team cohesion. So if you're not in tune with even just the basic needs of the people that you work with, that right there doesn't move the needle for you to be able to perform down the line moving forward.
Right. And it definitely doesn't make individuals want to stay, right? And when you're understanding the unique needs of staff, you're also listening to understand. A lot of times we listen to understand from our lens and from our viewpoint, but we have to take into account the different viewpoints that others bring into the space. In the chat, people said, engagement. Besides all things internally, it's important to introduce folks to other campus partners. And I definitely think that is a very much a part of best practices to engage staff. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, engaging and introducing others in a second. Someone else in the chat said, trying to make sure as a senior administrator, I'm the one who reaches out and spends time with coaches in the suite. And that's very important, understanding positionality and making sure that, if you're a coach, or no matter what level you are within an organization, that people who are within the senior leadership not only know you, but take time to understand the direction you're going, what you want to bring to the organization. And that kind of goes with fostering a sense of belonging. And I want to share some stats in a minute where it really shows how employees are really looking to have a sense of belonging. And that's about feeling respected and making sure that they can bring their whole selves to work. And some people will say, hey, Naya, I can't bring my whole self to work, right? I might be able to bring pieces of myself to work, but it's important that what I and how I want to show up at work is valued, is appreciated, and understood. And also best practices is about recognizing and combating blind spots. And we all have blind spots, biases that impact, the work that we do, who we select to be on committees, how we think about, promotions and different things like that. Those things can impact us at all times. And Lamar, so thinking about the work that you all do in leadership development, can you talk to us a little bit about how others may have shared how blind spots may impact them in the workplace, particularly as they move up?
Yeah. One specific example, just in the interest of time, is learning from one of our mid-level administrators about just their blind spots in the people that they surround themselves in within the workplace, right? They identify as one ethnicity, and in a leadership position, as we talk about, you have to foster that sense of belonging. One thing that this participant expressed is that as they moved up in leadership, they saw the blind spot that different staff members from different ethnicities didn't feel as comfortable going to them, because when they were in the office, they always surrounded themselves around the same people unless they had anything to do with work. So there was one day when someone expressed to them like, hey, I want you to know that there's a reason why this group of people aren't engaged with you. This is the perception in the office right now. And as a leader, that's tough to hear, but that was a blind spot that a participant shared with us in one of our programs.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And so we have another question that we want to pose to the audience, but because of time, we're not going to, we're going to do this like neat word cloud and see what you all had to think about it. But we'll ask you to share it in the chat and also just to think about this question. So this question is, how do you want to feel in a workplace environment? How do you want to feel in a workplace environment? So you can put it in the chat. You can just write it down and remember that and be able to have a conversation with colleagues or your supervisor at a later time to make sure that hopefully how you want to feel is how the environment is leading you to feel, and that you're fostering that for other colleagues and others as well. And so, Lamar, what's one word of how you want to feel in the workplace?
Trusted.
Trusted. Okay. For me, I say valued. Right.
Tell me more.
I know, I'm like, and that word could be so many things, right? And so for me, I'd say value, being able to utilize my strengths in the workplace. We're all hired for particular reasons. And so I have some unique strengths and gifts and talents that I bring into the workplace. And so for me, feeling valued is being able to utilize that, being able to have my voice heard when I'm in the room and stating, examples or giving out ideas. I want to know that my teammates and my supervisors and leaders value who I am and what I bring to the space. So again, share that with us in the chat. We now want to go to this next phase of sharing 2 bits of information before we go to Lamar's section. And so what makes leaders persist in or leave the organization? So from Deloitte, they say that diversity and inclusion in the workplace contributes to more employee engagement and better performance. And in this study, when they're talking about diversity and inclusion, we're not just thinking about the different identities that we bring to the table, but also thinking about diversity of thought. And a lot of times diversity of thought is not always included in this D&I conversation. But employees, when their diversity of thought are valued, right, what I just talked about, then employees have better engagement and better performance. The study also showed, this is a study within higher education leaders and organizations, and it stated that 79% of organizations report fostering a sense of belonging in the workplace is important for success. And we know in the previous slide that we discussed about that's a best practice to engage staff is creating that and fostering that sense of belonging. In that same study, it also showed that 25% of employees recognize comfort as the biggest driver of belonging. And again, belonging is wanting to be treated fairly and people to bring their authentic selves to work. So really, and I know that a lot of times now we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and people are adding that be belonging because it's so essential to the work of fostering diversity and equity and inclusion in the workplace. And then the other piece about what makes leaders, in this case, leave the organization is thinking about our next slide, where it's talking about allowing non-inclusive behaviors that are harmful to others to continue in the workplace without addressing it. And sometimes we're like, oh, that's just, a few people who have like an issue or a problem, but we have to recognize that not only are student athletes looking at non-inclusive behaviors that are harming others, but our colleagues are looking at that. And they don't, we don't want to be in a place where something is not being addressed. In another source of a study with Deloitte, employees say that they value inclusive behaviors over inclusive programs. And we know in the past 2 years or so, there's been a heightened and more programming around diversity and inclusion, and particularly racial justice. But employees are saying, hey, these programs are great, but when we're talking about inclusive behaviors, we want to see that happen. We want to see, what we're talking about in that program comes to fruition. And when we're talking about diversity in general, it's important to think about, we're talking about the multiple dimensions of diversity, right? And so like not only race and ethnicity, but sexual orientation, our gender equity, ability, religion, spirituality, nationality, socioeconomic status. So it's important to, again, have inclusive behaviors in the workplace, and failing to address exclusionary practices and policies that are written or unwritten is also reasons why individuals leave the organization. And so going back to that initial slide where we had those questions that we'll show in a minute, it really helps us to think about those different pieces as well. And it's important that when we're doing that people feel heard and valued and considered in the decision-making process. So again, as we think about how do we engage and retain diverse top talent, think about some of these questions and see where you're at as an organization and how you can move forward. So now we'll move forward, Lamar, with you with the next section of the presentation.
Great. Thanks, Naya. And I wanted to follow up on your one word. You are valued at the national office in IECE. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that.
I appreciate that validation. Thank you.
So to kick us off, I wanted to go into this quote because oftentimes you hear in just in general, not just in our industry, is, bloom where you're planted, bloom where you're planted. But for the interest of what we're talking about today, you have to water the flowers you want to grow. You have to water the flowers you want to grow. So you can tell people to bloom where they're planted, right? But if they're not being showered on with growth, development, opportunities being engaged, then there is no opportunity for them to grow. So in this next section, we're going to talk about how you want to be able to grow your organization. You have to grow your people. So similar to what Naya had on the screen of just some probing questions that we want you all to think about when you think about your organization, your campuses, your conferences, your institutions, right? What formal, informal mentoring takes place within your department? When do you begin to encourage staff to consider greater leadership roles? Or when do you even consider them that it's time to move on from your organization? And then why is it important to hold leadership accountable for providing critical development opportunities and high visibility assignments and roles necessary for advancement? We'll talk about that a little bit more towards the end. But these are the questions that, again, take a screenshot, take a picture that you should think about for your organization as a reflection after we're done today, because looking at it from the lens of just organizations I've been a part of, and now there's always room for improvement. And even going through this exercise for you all, there's things there that I know that I can do better myself as a leader. So Naya alluded to it a little bit, thinking about diversity, right? And there's so many components that go into diversity. I wanted to focus in on generational diversity. And I won't go through the whole spiel about the different generations. My good friend Lizzie Pollock did that last week for the D2 administrators. But I wanted you all to be aware that, as we go down this path thinking about growth and development, right now, we have 5 generations in the workplace, from traditionalists to baby boomers to Gen X to millennials, and then our Generation Zs. And the key thing about moving forward in this is that all of these generations want some type of growth or development, but it may look different for those different individuals. And as we think about being inclusive and not stereotyping people, just because my year may fall in the millennial side of things doesn't mean that I'm necessarily going to act how the research says I should act as well. So just wanted to give that caveat before we walk down. But there is some breaking news that I think a lot of you are aware of moving forward. So multiple reports and just anything that you can see right now within the world, and thinking about the Great Resignation, millennials will make up 75% of the workforce in 2025. So you think about the date that I put back there, you're looking at some of our ADs right now that are millennials, some of our conference commissioners that are millennials, and below them are Gen Zs, and even our presidents that are even traditionalists, baby boomers, and Gen X are in the workforce, but 75% in the next 3 years will be millennials. So let's talk about that, all right? According to the LinkedIn Global and Workplace Learning Reports, wanted to pull this information for you all. 60% of employees in the workplace express improving culture in an organization begins with professional development. So 60% of these employees in the workforce said that the culture renovation, the culture creation begins with knowing that their leadership prioritizes their professional development. Even 94% of employees say that they will stay at a company longer if it funded learning opportunities. And I know the key word in there is funded, and we all don't always have maximum resources, but I'll tell you about some of our action tips later here. It's not always about funding learning opportunities. It's about creating learning opportunities. 65% of Gen Z and millennials say learning is the number one thing that makes them happy at work. The number one thing, not money, not benefits, not even work-life balance. Learning, and that can look in so many different ways. And then I wanted to at least reveal this stat as well. The percentage is a little smaller, but 25% of Gen Z and millennials say the number one reason they leave their job is if they didn't have enough learning and growth opportunities. So again, I think about, sometimes having conversations with colleagues and just other administrators that are older than me, younger than me, the same age, is there's a lot of job hopping, and looking at the main core of it is that most times there's poor leadership. And two, what I hear from at least the young professionals that I mentor, I didn't have enough learning and growth opportunities is why I left that organization. And that may be different from, 10, 15, 20 years ago. But the reality is we're in 2022. So we as leaders, as hiring managers, as CEOs, as ADs, as presidents, we have to adjust with the times to know that this group moving forward is the majority of our workforce. Okay. So on this last slide here, I'm going to talk about creating a culture of development, and then we'll get into some questions. So if you have any questions right now from when Didi started to Naya to myself, start to put those questions in the chat as we move to wrap up here. But what I want to get us to talk about here is you don't have to have the funds to be able to send your staff to professional development opportunities. Yes, that is great to send them to NACDA and to be able to send them to NCAA development programs, which we've already put the link in the website. We'll throw it in there again so that you all have that information for our upcoming programs. Yes, that is a shameless plug, but we're talking about growth and development opportunities. We have to push our NCAA leadership development programs. However, there are other programs out there that are either fully funded or maybe that you have to come out of pocket just a little bit. But from the professional development side, within your control, provide stretch and high visibility assignments. And what does that look like? It goes back to the retaining part and knowing the unique needs of your staff. What ignites them? What gets them excited? Where do they want to grow? And do they even see where they want to grow? Right? Being in tune with not just your staff, but your peers to make sure like, okay, how can I create a stretch assignment for this individual to be able to grow? Right? Give you a perfect example. I was in a university about 3 or 4 years ago, and we developed a leadership development program. And I love doing leadership development, so it's hard for me to step away. However, I knew that this certain individual wanted to facilitate and create the curriculum to be able to add that to their resume. Now, we couldn't send them to NACDA. We couldn't send them to other programs, but I knew that this opportunity would give this individual visibility and would stretch their learning to be able to advance to their next role. All right, so I took a step back and provided them an opportunity through a coaching role to be able to have that assignment, take on that program, and then facilitate and execute it. Now, there may have not been perfect, but there was opportunities for growth there and a challenge, which, again, talking about the future of the workforce, that is the individual that I was dealing with, which was a millennial as well. How can you create informal and formal mentoring programs? I know some institutions that have mentorships from their executive staff. So each executive staff member, including the AD, mentors either a young professional or a mid-level manager, right? That type of succession planning, maybe to have that person mentor an assistant AD, that's a deputy AD, and have that be a way for them to move up or for them to move out. We always know that sometimes senior leadership gets into a position and they might stay there for a while. That's an opportunity to grow those individuals and hopefully retain them within providing that mentorship, providing those stretch assignments as well. And then don't be afraid to provide opportunities for cross-functional projects. So we know there's always different perspectives of this depending on the division that you're in, right? Each division has their own way of operating things, and we know that some positions are siloed depending on the institution that you're at. But don't be afraid to give your fundraising and development person the opportunity to advise some student athletes. Now, advise as far as talking them through maybe classes or talking them through life. I'm not telling you to have them talk through Bylaw 14 with your student athletes unless you put them through a training, right? And vice versa. Maybe there's an opportunity for an academic advisor to go out and speak to a donor or shadow a development officer just to see what it's like to be a development officer in that respect. There's always opportunities for those cross-functional projects. Yes, we're very busy, but think about how those opportunities can expose different individuals to talents that they may or may not know that they have within your organization. And then again, they're not seeking that from somewhere else if you do it within your house. Micro and macro leadership opportunities. The micro leadership opportunity, like I talked about, leading an assignment, leading a project, or simply if you're the chair of a committee, have one of your interns, have one of your direct reports, take the agenda and facilitate that meeting for you, right? A small opportunity for them to get in front of stakeholders, the committee, and then be able to facilitate dialogue within that certain committee meeting. And then coach more, manage less, right? I love the book Radical Candor because it talks about really challenging directly, right? But then making sure that you coach through everything that you go through. So it's not necessarily a feedback after every assignment, after every program, after every competition, but how are you being able to coach your coaches if you oversee sports, coach your staff, coach your student athletes? How are you be able to coach them more to be able to develop them and have them grow within that place? The millennials, Gen Zs, Gen X, baby boomer, traditionalists, everyone loves feedback. And the more feedback that you can give them through a coaching and development role, the more that they will grow within your organization. Well, I think, Naya, that is all I have for my part. I think it's time for some questions.
Yeah, so we have a lot of questions coming in. They're all directed right now to Dee Dee. So feel free to ask Lamar and ask some questions, or we'll just give it all to Dee Dee. So Dee Dee, the first question is, for the Leadership Collective, has there been any thought into extending access to an AD designee and expanding database to middle management candidates? For example, Director of Sport Performance, Director of Marketing or Communications.
So first of all, thanks for that question. And yes, that is 2.0. That is version 2.0. This version was created so that it could be open to all levels. And so we will have I should say profile users will have the opportunity from entry level all the way up to executive level to come in and create their profiles. Those who fit the criteria and who are creating their profiles will also have the opportunity to list those particular specialties and designations, be it ADID, be it SWA. They will have the opportunity to list those designations in their profile. And then conversely, on the searcher side, the searcher will then be able to create searches based on that. So yes, the new platform will be available to all levels, and those designations will be in there. So anyone else have any questions? Please feel free to submit them at this time. We'd love to answer any questions that you have.
Dee Dee, this next question, you've already kind of answered it, but I'll ask it anyways. It says, for those of us who have administrative and coaching experience that want to be in the database, how should we go about that?
So in the new version of the platform, you will have the opportunity to be able to list out your job title, as well as to be able to list your experiences. And so if you are a person, a lucky person, in my opinion, if I could say that off the top, that has had the opportunity to serve as both coach and administrator in an athletics department, you will have the opportunity to be able to list that. Once the platform is ready to launch, that information will be located on our website. And all users will have to do is go through a very quick vetting process to maintain the integrity of the information on the platform. We want everybody to be able to come in and freely give their information. And so therefore, we do have a quick vetting process to make sure that people are who they say they are. We can keep all of the nasty computer programs and bots and all that stuff out of there. So.
Thank you. Dee Dee, before we get to the next question for you, a question for Lamar. So when you're talking about creating a culture of development, what do you think has been sometimes the biggest challenge or barrier for those to start in terms of creating this culture of development?
Good question. I think the biggest barrier is that the top isn't always aligned with that culture of development. So depending on where you're at, there could be a really great administrator that has their own department and they do staff advances, retreats, book clubs, professional development, the whole 9 yards. But then it could be 3 or 4 other departments that don't do anything. And it has to really start from the top of the AD or the conference commissioner or whoever it is that is in charge of that organization to be able to create that culture of development at the top. So I mentioned that one organization or institution has a mentor program that starts with executive staff, and the AD is a mentor as well. But they engage with all of the development programs that their mentees engage with. So if they're talking about effective communication, those senior administrators are a part of that program as well. And then that trickles down to show there's a priority at the top, not just with the AD, but with his ambassadors and his team, that growing our people is very important. So I think the barrier is sometimes when you're not the one that either is close to the top or even has access to the top to be able to have that conversation and help create or recreate that type of culture.
Yeah, that's definitely important for anyone who's holding that athletic director title to consider. Dee Dee, the next question for you is, for the Leadership Collective, has there been any thought, I already asked that question. So for the leadership development, for the Leadership Collective, what do you think is the biggest attribute thus far of the collective?
The biggest attribute so far of the collective is just the exposure. For so long we've heard time and time again that where are these talented administrators and coaches of color? We can't find them. And so, that was used as the excuse to be able to, move in a different direction in terms of hiring. And so, we're really trying to solve for that problem. And so having the opportunity to have exposure and have in-depth exposure, I'll warn people right now, coming in to the platform and creating a profile is going to take you about 30 minutes. But what's 30 minutes in relation to your career goals, right? It's nothing. So, having the opportunity to really be able to come in and toot your own horn is one of the greatest positive attributes of the Leadership Collective, because then people can come in and be able to take a look at your profile and be like, wow, this is a great young leader. This is a great leader who has 15 years of experience in the industry and is ready to take that next step forward. I'm going to reach out to this person. So that exposure is what is critical and what has been probably the most positive and important attribute of the collective.
And thank you for sharing that. That exposure is definitely something valuable and it will be long lasting. And then another question that we have that I'll take is asking about providing an example of integrating diversity initiatives into routine departmental practices such as orientation and training. And I think it's very important that a lot of times when we think about diversity initiatives, we think about it as something some other work that we have to do to add on to it. But how do we integrate what we're already doing? How do we integrate diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives into what we're already doing? So how do we have conversations during staff meetings that have elements of talking about diversity inclusion? How are we thinking about the work that we're doing from an ED&I lens? How are we providing trainings and workshops? And it's also, nice and important to recognize cultural months and celebrations, things that are very important to the staff and the student athletes that we serve. So we can do multiple different things. And I think that sometimes the challenge is just starting. And there are a lot of resources on the Office of Inclusion webpage and leadership development and our other conferences and athletic departments that are doing various things to engage staff and integrate diversity initiatives into the work. And so feel free to reach out to us at the Office of Inclusion if you have any questions or want ideas. We are definitely willing to help and to support you all. And so I want to thank my colleagues in leadership development for sharing about the Leadership Collective and about how we recruit, retain, and cultivate diverse talent. And so now, as we get ready to conclude the session, I want to turn it over to Dr. Amy Wilson, my leader, who's the Managing Director in the Office of Inclusion. Amy?
Naya, thank you so much. As Naya said, my name is Amy Wilson. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I serve as the Managing Director in the Office of Inclusion. Thanks to all in the virtual audience for your engagement today and your excellent questions. And gratitude to my teammates in inclusion, education, and community engagement, Felicia, Naya, Didi, and Lamar, for sharing valuable resources and providing useful guidance about how to cultivate, recruit, and retain diverse talent in leadership positions across intercollegiate athletics. With intentionality, we need to take charge of the narratives around diverse hiring and act on increasing the number of diverse leaders in college sports. Instead of achieving a more diverse leadership is a problem we need to address, no, it's an opportunity. A growing body of research indicates that diverse teams are better problem solvers, higher functioning, more collaborative, more successful. In athletics, we strive for success. We embrace winning, and it's a diverse team who can help us get there. And once that diverse team is in place, creating cultures of belonging, as Naya emphasized, that support leaders in their jobs is essential so that they can not only persist, but they can thrive. A 2019 article in the Harvard Business Review titled "The Value of Belonging at Work" states that, and I quote, "High belonging was linked to a whopping 56% increase in job performance, a 50% drop in turnover rate risk, and a 75% reduction in sick days." And instead of, as Didi already pointed out so well, we can't find them. We can't find diverse candidates. Yes, you can, through valuable resources like the Leadership Development's Leadership Collective that we learned about today, and from all of the administrators, coaches, student athletes at all levels of the career pipeline who are being served by Leadership Development's amazing programs. And there are other organizations who prioritize cultivating and lifting diverse candidates to positions of leadership. Leadership Development and the Office of Inclusion are proud to continue partnerships with impactful groups like Women Leaders in College Sports and the Minority Opportunities and Athletics Association, who are supporting schools and conferences' efforts to increase the number of diverse leaders in intercollegiate athletics. The 4 NCAA membership D&I committees are also important partners in this work. The Committee to Promote Cultural Diversity and Equity has prioritized in its goals the NCAA Presidential Pledge, referenced by Felicia at the start of the program. And the committee has called attention and engaged with membership initiatives like the West Coast Conference's Bill Russell Rule that requires its schools to interview diverse candidates. Our student athlete population is becoming increasingly diverse. We owe it to our student athletes to have role models, to have leaders in our athletic departments and across our campuses with whom they share core identities. And when our student athletes see it, they believe they can be it. Intercollegiate athletics can only benefit from our talented student athletes serving as our future leaders. On behalf of my colleagues in inclusion, education, and community engagement, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for this convention session. And please know we appreciate your feedback and thank you for completing the questionnaire, the survey that is available. To access it, you click on the session title in the agenda tab. And from there, if you click survey, there'll be 3 questions that won't take much time to answer, but will be very helpful to us. And please join in the conversation on social media as well at #NCAACONV. Thanks again, and we wish you all good health.